All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back live now to the second segment. It is the 6th day of March 2008. I am extremely honored to be joined by one of my idols, someone I admire as a real journalist and a true patriot who's been defending the sovereignty of this nation, defending the jobs of every working American, and who stood up in an incredible way to globalism and the corruption of the out-of-control federal government. He, of course, was born in Texas. Very proud that he hails from my state. And he joins us. His new book is bound to be a bestseller like all his others. He's the best-selling author of The War on the Middle Class. And the new book is Independence Day. He is Lou Dobbs. Lou Dobbs, thanks for coming on with us.
Oh, it's great to be with you. Thank you for the kind words.
You're a busy man. I hear you're going to start a syndicated radio show on top of your CBS TV show and your #1 CNN show.
As a matter of fact, we started Monday, and we're off and running a soft launch on a syndicated radio show, and I'm having a ball with it. You didn't tell me how much fun this was.
It is, because you have the free form and you're not, kept down to little 5-minute segments. We've only got you for this segment, so I want to move quickly and go through a lot of points. Tell us about your new book.
Well, Independence Day is a cry for people to start thinking and acting independently, to push back against these partisan political parties, the Republican Party and Democratic Party alike, who've really brought us to the mess that we're in, and now are fielding 3 candidates that say they're the solution. It is a remarkable approach to create the problems, sustain and perpetuate the problems, and continue to run as those who will solve those problems. And as a result, we get more of the same every 4 years in this country.
Well, we certainly do. I'd like you to be as candid as possible. You always do that, but I mean, to really give us the bottom line, both parties bought and paid for by the Fortune 100, who could care less about our sovereignty, who have already basically strip-mined this nation economically. What do you see coming out of this election with McCain and versus Hillary or Obama?
I truly believe, just as you said, Alex, that both parties are bought and paid for by corporate America, by socio-ethnocentric interests, special interests, and the first tenet of any democracy is that the rule of the majority prevails, and that the majority will rule in a democracy. We have a representative republic in which those tenets of democracy were to be preserved. That is, the majority would be first recognized and ruled. The majority in this country is simply ignored by the elites of both our political system, academia, and corporate America. And this race will result in a perpetuation of partisan control and the control of corporate America. There will be no change, I will guarantee you, if one of the two candidates of these two political parties is elected president. There won't be a change in our fortunes at all.
You joined CNN when it was founded out of the gates as their financial news director. You have been studying this. You've run private, successful companies yourself. We see Congress with, depending on the poll, between an 11 and 20% approval rating, the lowest it's ever been. Both parties are reviled. We've never seen this before. Looking forward, that the establishment is just giving us more of the same. Kennedy said those that make peaceful revolutions impossible make violent revolutions inevitable. Looking forward, do you see some type of either economic or even physical revolution or more and more clashes between the disappearing middle class and these elites?
I happen to be one of those, Alex, who believes very strongly that either we will take back our system of government, that is a populist representative republic, and that will function through the consent of the governed, or we will see an absolute change of direction. I don't think it'll be a violent revolution, but I think there will be a crisis that will impend and demand action on the part of the people. The American people right now are not being represented in Washington, D.C. The will of the majority is not being followed. As a matter of fact, it's been derided, spit at by those that we are sending to Washington, D.C. to represent working men and women and middle-class families in this country. And that is the foundation of this country's very existence, the American dream. And it's being dashed by the nonsense that we're permitting in Washington and our own failure to demand both better of ourselves and our government.
I see one of the biggest crises is not just the war in Iraq, now over $1 trillion, $300 billion that you speak so much about, but also the plunging value of the dollar. Greenspan a week ago telling the Arab countries to go ahead and dump the dollar, now accelerating that. We could see this crisis coming to a head very soon.
I believe that there is no question that a crisis in our financial system is already here. When we are looking at the dollar decline to all-time lows against the euro, falling against the yen, and dropping to 20-year lows against many of the major currencies in the world, that is a clear signal as to how much trouble this economy is in. Alex, as you know, we have $53 trillion in unfunded liabilities in Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all of the entitlement programs. We have a $9 trillion national debt, a $6 trillion trade debt that's rising faster than our national debt. And we have idiots in Washington, D.C. and academia walking around suggesting that the economy is just fine and business as usual will work out just ducky. I mean, it is. If it were not so tragic, it would be laughable.
Lou Dobbs, why have the elites that control this nation, whereas 20, 30 years ago with the last dollar crises we had, they decided to shore it up and try to keep it as the world reserve currency? I look at the economic landscape. It seems all we have left was our dollar being the world reserve currency, but instead the federal government has had a weak dollar policy, which only spells rack and ruin. Why do you think they're doing that?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that the reason they're doing it, again, in my opinion, is that these people believe that this is 1965 rather than 2008. There was a time when if you lowered the value of the dollar, it would make our exports cheaper, and we would push back against imports because they would be more expensive, and you could look to a trade balance. But we, Alex, are absolutely dependent on China for our toys, our computers, our consumer electronics, our clothing. So there's no, what the economists call elasticity in the demand relationship on imports. So as this administration has demanded that the Chinese, in effect, raise the price of their exports to the United States, the reality is we're going to create even more inflation in this country. We have the specter of stagflation staring at us coldly and, I think, inevitably right now.
Some pundits, even on national television, have come out and said that the globalists, and now the Council on Foreign Relations 3 weeks ago, as you know, came out and confirmed that and said, we want to go ahead and get rid of the dollar to create a new kind of a marrow dollar and then merge that with the euro. So I believe the globalists, in their own words, by design, want to kind of put the dollar slowly to death so they can then replace it.
Right. Well, I think that there's no doubt that those who would, in every way, degrade the sovereignty of this country would want to certainly degrade the power, the strength, and the respect of the U.S. dollar. And it is the last thing we should permit. But what we should all understand is when that dollar is declining as it is right now in world markets, it is the clearest possible signal that we could have that our economy is in a very, very desperate condition. And we have to start being responsible, taking prudent action to return to the values that makes this country great. And that in every sense of the social order and in terms of the economic order, that means we have to raise our savings rate. We have to take control of our borrowing from overseas. We have to come to terms with the enormous debt that we have allowed our elites in this country to run up. Well, the working man and woman in this country has not participated in what has been a period of prosperity for corporate America for 20 years.
We only have about 5-6 minutes left with Lou Dobbs, obviously a very busy man with a syndicated radio show, writing columns, CNN every night with his #1 program in that time slot. So I want to move quickly here, sir. Again, the new book is Independence Day. Everybody needs to get it. It's excellent, and it's rocketing up the charts right now. Lou, I want to talk briefly about yourself. Growing up in Texas, your life, getting into the media, being a journalist. When did you start waking up to, as you say, the new world order and these elites, and the last 5-6 years really turning the heat up on them? What was your awakening to these elites?
My awakening to and by the way, I just want to make it very clear. I am a capitalist. I believe fervently in this free enterprise democracy of ours.
But this isn't free market under the globalist system.
Well, it certainly is not in terms of that. I'm talking about in terms of its ideal.
Yes.
And the reality is that this country is what has created wealth throughout the world over the course of the past 40 years. This great economy has driven just about 3/4 of the wealth generated in the world over the past 40 years. But my awakening came on September 11th, 2001, in which I saw the way in which this government reacted and responded and failed to stop that vicious terrorist attack. It came in 2001 when Enron collapsed. With the corporate corruption scandals of 2001 and 2002 and the way in which corporate America refused to work in the national interest and to look to the common good, but rather to try to maintain and preserve a world without regulation or responsibility.
They made it clear that they could care less about this nation.
Right, absolutely. And the multinationals who are going to participate in this $13 trillion, the world's richest economy, have to take responsibility and take leadership. Instead, they have hidden behind the Business Roundtable, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the lobbying organizations, and it's seldom you'll hear an individual CEO stand up and speak on any issue involving our society, our people, or the national interest, leaving their voices filled in favor of the efforts of their lobby, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce.
Lou Dobbs, since you bring up 9/11, I want to read a quote here instead of just playing the audio. This is Lou Dobbs on your national CNN news program. The fact that they would continue to perpetuate the lie suggests that we need a full investigation of what is going on and what is demonstrably and incompetent, and what is worse, a deceitful federal government. You said that months ago. Now it's come out that the White House was manipulating the 9/11 Commission, which they appointed, of course. They first tried to give us Kissinger. What are you talking about, incompetence versus deceitful federal government surrounding 9/11?
Well, I'm talking about, in this regard, I'm talking about the idea that we give George Tenet a gold medal while the CIA failed to act intelligently and responsibly to stop that attack. I'm talking about a government that continues almost 7 years after September 11th to leave our borders wide open and our ports insecure, with 95% of the goods entering this country uninspected. It's unconscionable. At the same time, this president, the Democratic leadership in the House and the Senate all claim to be concerned about the American people's safety and welfare during a time of war against terror, and yet they leave our ports and our borders wide open. That's deceitful, it's dishonest, and it's irresponsible. So that brings me to my next question. It is such a manifest fraud to have the banks accepting consular matriculas that you can get out of a Cracker Jack box for illegal aliens. Bush trying to give $140+ billion to Mexico for their military, when it's been all over Texas papers for a long time. Now it's finally in national news that Mexican troops shoot at Border Patrol, come across, grab drug shipments away from sheriffs I've interviewed that have had Mexican troops stick German machine guns to their heads and say, give us the marijuana back. All this is going on, and then meanwhile, they're setting up internal checkpoints to search Americans and check our papers. Well, it's unconscionable. Again, what this administration, this government, this Congress, and we the people have permitted in allowing the Bush administration to have effectively further reduced our sovereignty and the respect for our laws, and certainly regard for our borders and our ports. It's been a shameless period in American history that we're going to have to reverse.
Doesn't that show that they're obviously not too concerned about a terror attack? And I guess if one happens, that means they get even more governmental control if they don't stop those further attacks and leave the border wide open?
Alex, in terms of trying to figure out what in the world this president and this administration is thinking at any time, if indeed they are thinking, is well beyond my limited capacity.
Lou, last question.
Absolutely unfathomable.
North American Union, we saw it in SPP documents a year ago. Now they admit that they're merging the Canadian and U.S. military for domestic operations. Your final comment.
that if people do not awaken to the absolute threat to this nation's sovereignty posed by the Texas Trans Corridor, the NAFTA superhighway, the North American Union, under the guise of the so-called Security and Prosperity Partnership among Canada, the United States, and Mexico, then this country can kiss its future goodbye, because it is precisely what's underway.
I think the New World Order is going to be defeated in the end.
And I do believe that if the American people awaken, we can do anything we choose, including assure that this great nation bestows its blessings on succeeding generations of Americans. But we have to awaken, and we have to do it soon.
All right, Lou, thanks you for the time.
Thanks, Alex. Bye-bye.
Take care. There goes Lou Dobbs, ladies and gentlemen. That is one busy man.